My honor to nominate Ohio Senator J.D. Vance for the office of Vice President of the United States of America.
J.D. Vance has had a meteoric rise in the Republican Party. From a best-selling author and never-Trumper in 2016...
I'm a never-Trump guy. I never liked him.
...to winning a U.S. Senate seat at age 38. And now, he's former President Donald Trump's running mate.
Elect Donald Trump in 2024. God bless you, sir.
J.D. Vance has risen quickly in the Republican Party, moving from a best-selling author and never-Trumper in 2016 to a U.S. Senator by age 38.
Very much a creature of the new Republican Party that Trump has shaped in his image. By picking Vance, Trump is showing he's doubling down on this MAGA agenda. It's a full-throated, populist, national conservative ticket.
Here's why the Trump-Vance ticket is a big deal for the future of the MAGA movement and the GOP. J.D. Vance first catapulted to fame in 2016 after he published his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. The book detailed his experience growing up poor in Rust Belt, Ohio, and making it to Yale Law School. It was a smash hit and became a Ron Howard-directed movie in 2020.
I know I could have done better, but you got to decide. You want to be somebody or not?
We're trying to paint this white nationalist movement as a movement primarily of poor and working class Americans, when the truth is that the alt-right is actually led by better educated and frankly pretty well-to-do people.
In his initial foray into the public spotlight, Vance was very much anti-Trump. His book made clear that he was a conservative. Many people latched onto it as an explanation for Trump's sort of surprise success in the Republican Party and then in the election.
When Vance launched his campaign for the Senate in 2021, his stance on Trump underwent a big shift.
I obviously didn't fully appreciate the president's appeal in 2016.
Yeah, he said some bad things about me, but that was before he knew me, and then he fell in love.
He even described himself to me in one interview as a flip-flop flipper on Trump, saying that he had similar policy views but was against Trump as a person until he realized that Trump was advocating for the policies that he supported.
While running for Senate, Vance was one of several pro-Trump candidates in the primary. But in one debate, Vance was the lone candidate to oppose a NATO-enforced no-fly zone over Ukraine, and that caught the eye of Trump's inner circle.
What a no-fly zone, it sounds nice, like we asked the Russians not to fly planes over Ukraine. What it means in practice is American Marine Corps pilots, Air Force pilots, and Navy pilots getting in dogfights with Russian jets. Which the problem with that is it's not in our vital national interest.
That impressed Donald Trump Jr., and he began advocating for Vance's candidacy, including with his father.
Trump's unique brand of conservative politics has been reshaping the core tenets of the Republican Party since he was elected in 2016, like tighter borders and a retreat from the world stage. He's changed the GOP so much that the Republican National Committee recently revamped its platform to a new, stripped-down version, one that focuses more on Trump himself than on specific policy decisions.
Trump has been changing all of those stances to the point where many older Republicans feel it's no longer recognizable. At the same time, a movement has arisen in Trump's image that believes in his policies and believes that the Republican Party should be reshaped in his image.
Believers in this movement, referred to as the New Right or National Conservatives, take Trump's impulses and turn them into doctrine. Vance has become one of their leading voices.
The American people, again, they need people who put the interests of their own citizens first, of our own citizens first. And that's what this entire movement is all about. And I think that's what the Trump presidency will be about if we give him another shot, as I expect that we will.
When Trump selected Mike Pence to be his running mate, that was a pick very much intended to reassure Republican voters. Pence, being a traditional conservative, an evangelical Christian, was someone who regular Republicans who saw Trump as sort of an arriviste in their party could look at Pence and say, all right, that's someone I can trust. Fast forward to 2024, it's clear that Trump no longer sees a need to share power with that wing of the Republican Party.
Right after Trump's attempted assassination in July, Vance was one of the first Republicans to publicly cast blame at the Biden campaign for the shooting. As Republicans unite around the Trump-Vance ticket after the July 13th attack, Democrats remain in disarray following President Biden's disastrous debate performance in June. Biden has vowed to stay in the race despite continuing calls from fellow Democrats to step away from his place at the top of the ticket.
I think there's a whole pool of voters there in the center of the electorate who really are not being spoken to by either candidate because of the way these tickets have shaped up.
Senators Marco Rubio from Florida and Tim Scott from South Carolina were also contenders on Trump's VP shortlist. Both could have appealed more to minority voters, something that Trump has historically struggled with. Choosing Vance allows Trump to shore up support among the white working class.
Ohio is also part of the Rust Belt, and the most crucial states in this election are those Rust Belt states. That white working class vote is a vote that is also very crucial throughout those Rust Belt battlegrounds. There is a hope by some of Vance's backers and some on Trump's team that he could potentially galvanize those voters even more than Trump already does to juice Republican turnout in those states.
What was the Russia collusion hoax? It was about destroying Donald Trump. This ridiculous New York fraud case, it's about destroying the guy's wealth before he re-enters the Oval Office.
Good. It's good to see you, man. Thank you.
He is really a bet on the future as well, a bet on the future of the Republican Party and a bet on the future of the populist conservative movement. Trump would never say he's anointing a successor, but Vance was decades younger than the other potential picks that were under consideration for vice president. And in choosing such a young person to be on the ticket with him, there's an unavoidable implication that Trump has sort of chosen an heir, chosen someone to take the mantle of that MAGA movement and go forward with it, whether it's as a future president himself or simply as someone who is poised to exert great influence in the Republican Party, continuing to shape it along those populist conservative lines for years or potentially decades.
Let's take a look at what Gutfeld has to say on this in his live show. He had Mike Baker, Lee Zeldin, comedian Michael Loftus, and Kat Timpf. He gave their thoughts on J.D. Vance. Let's start with Mike.
Trump's a VP pick, J.D. Vance, Mike Baker. Was this a surprise to you? What are your thoughts about Mr. Vance?
Yeah, not a surprise. I think it's a solid choice. Look, he's a veteran. He's got 3 kids. They're very young.
That's what everybody says. We were joking about this when the media doesn't know who he is, and then they get this little checklist. They go, "Oh, he's a lawyer. He's a vet. He's got 3 kids."
He said that it did not surprise him. He called Vance a good choice. He stressed that Vance is a soldier and has 3 young children.
I'll tell you what's good about him, Mike Baker.
Okay.
He's the insurance policy for Trump. So if you want to take out Trump, oh, you're screwed, because then you got this guy, and he's more of a populist than Trump is. It's like when people were like, you got to get rid of Bill O'Reilly, you got to get rid of, well, then you know what you got? Jesse Waters.
Yeah.
Gutfeld then responded, Mike, then chipped in Gutfeld.
Although, I feel the same way about Biden. You take out Biden, you got Kamala Harris. So,
yeah, that's true.
You got it, but for different reasons. No, I think it's a great choice. I think it's solid. He's been obviously a staunch supporter, and so it's a pretty powerful team.
Gutfeld then responded, Mike, then chipped in Gutfeld.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, he already had Ohio. Do you think this was strategically smart, or is it just Trump saying, "I do what I want to do. I don't care if this helps."
Then asked Lee Zeldin.
Helps or hurts?
I think JD plays well in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. He's won statewide. In order to win statewide, in Ohio, you have cities like Cincinnati and Cleveland. I would encourage President Trump to have JD Vance go to all these blue areas across the country and be a force multiplier on the ticket. He's a good messenger. You can send him into hostile media. You can ask him the toughest questions. He'll give you a great, likable response. He's smart. Yeah, he is a vet. He hasn't forgot where he's come from. He's a successful entrepreneur. He started with nothing. He was in poverty. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't forgotten what he had to do to earn this opportunity. And I think that he is going to represent the little people across this country. I think that middle-income Americans from coast to coast, as they get to learn more about him, I think that they will love and appreciate the fact that they will have representation in the vice presidential office that they do not have with Kamala Harris.
Does he have kids, Lee?
Michael.
I love how you bring inside jokes from the break to the show, as if the audience has any idea what you're talking about.
Let's hear Lee Zeldin response.
Michael, in a way, you're the opposite of J.D. Vance. You started with everything, and now you have nothing.
Gutfeld then asked Michael Lofty about his thoughts on J.D. Vance.
Maybe not even a job here after realizing it's live television. He's an amazing guy, this J.D. Vance.
Wrote Hillbilly Elegy.
And he's married, and he's got like 3 kids.
He does, yeah.
No, I really, I tell you who doesn't like him is Kamala Ding Dong.
Yeah.
She's not going to be getting a lot of sleep tonight. I cannot wait for those debates.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance is going to be great. And that's going to be, well, J.D., you probably don't. She's just going to be mental. And Trump's going to, he's going to save a fortune on the banners and everything because you can just replace a couple of letters from Pence to Vance. So America is going to save a lot of money.
Michael gave a hilarious response.
Estimates on that, okay? You lose a B, you
okay, you put in the P, take the E out. Let's go Vance.
Yeah. So, Kat, okay, J.D. Vance, very vocal anti-Trumper in 2016, as was I, right? And I think part of it is the Dems and the media are criticizing him for that, but it kind of shows you that Trump is not the man of vengeance. Yeah. And that he actually, this is a guy that said horrible things about him, and he chooses him as VP.
Gutfeld then moved down to Kat, her thoughts.
Well, right, but he did a hard turn on that. He very much changed his mind on that. And so I actually am among the people who think that obviously JD's very, very smart, as we've all discussed, his incredible story. I also don't think there really is a such thing as a person who loves J.D. Vance, who doesn't already love Trump.
Yes.
So I don't think he brings in new voters in that sense.
Right.
So I do think Trump just picked the dude he liked the best for the job himself. I think this was an IDGAF pick, which means I don't GAF. Trump doesn't GAF, but I feel like getting shot in the head might do that to you.
Yeah, it's like, you know what?
I feel like if you were shot in the head, you might be like, you know what? I'm just going to pick the one that I want. I was shot in the head 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Gutfeld then chipped in to create a finality tone for the live.
This is nothing. Last week, Trump actually said that J.D. Vance reminded him of a young Abe Lincoln. And then I guess yesterday, J.D. Vance said that Trump reminded him of a luckier Abe Lincoln. Terrible. What, too soon?
Tucker Carlson shared his thoughts on J.D. Vance, saying that anyone who pays attention should be happy. He stated that he didn't need to make a case for Vance because he noticed that all the bad players in Washington were united against him. Also, Vivek Ramaswamy discusses selection of J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's 2024 running mate.
So what do you think about J.D. Vance as the pick for vice president?
I think he's an outstanding pick. He is somebody who I've actually personally known for a very long time. We were law school classmates, funny enough, and I've known him on a personal level outside of politics. And one thing I like about him is he's somebody who engages with disagreement in a thoughtful way. And he's also somebody who has lived the American dream. He didn't come from elite backgrounds, but he has succeeded at the highest levels in the country. And that speaks to me personally. My parents came to this country with no money. I've built multi-billion-dollar companies. He has a very similar story. And I hope that gives a lot of inspiration to Americans. And he's also going to help take the America First agenda to the next level, which is something I care a lot about as well.
Why do you think Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance? It was a pretty competitive field.
Yeah, I can't speak for what went behind that. It's obviously hot off the press, but I do think he's going to be an excellent vice president, and that would be a pretty good reason to pick somebody.
People who are critics of J.D. Vance say he's a never-Trumper, that he said some critical things about Donald Trump. What would you say to them?
I would say that actually that could be a unique attribute for him, if you think about it, and making the case to voters who did not vote for Trump in 2016. He could say something similar. You know what? I didn't vote for Trump in 2016 either, but here's why I came around. So I think that's actually could be what people frame as a negative, could actually be a very positive attribute. To me, I think he's one of the best fighters we have in the Senate. So the Senate is going to miss him. That may be the only negative, and I mean that as a compliment to him. But he's a great man. He's a good man, good family. We know them well. Our families are close, and we are so proud of them and excited for what's ahead for him.
I've heard one of the reasons Donald Trump liked J.D. Vance is he's known to be a really good debater, and he'd be good against Kamala Harris. How do you think that debate's going to play out?
I think it will be, if it's Kamala Harris, I think that J.D. will mop the floor, but we will see if it's Kamala Harris or not. J.D.'s thoughtful, and he's somebody who I've engaged in, a lot of thoughtful discussions on even topics where he and I don't entirely agree, but he's pushed me and I've pushed him to think about things in different ways. And that's what we need more of in our country. It's rare in our politics, and I'm rooting for more of that. So I wish him well.
When it comes to this election, what do you think is going to be the one thing that really decides who wins?
I think it's going to be a hunger for pride, actually. You could say the economy, you could say the border, but I think people are hungry to be proud of this country again. And whichever president is going to make you more proud of being an American, that's what people are hungry for right now more than anything. And I think right now, runaway, without question, hands down decision, that's Donald Trump. So.
And we're all horrified by what happened to Donald Trump, the assassination attempt. Yeah. What are your feelings now, a few days beyond this? That fist bump was iconic, but where does America go to from here?
Well, I think we live in a moment where people are hungry for national unity. I think it was a miracle that Donald Trump was not struck, and we are lucky to be given that chance. Now what are we going to do with it? And my hope is we live in a moment where we can still disagree vehemently with the left's ideology, but without seeing our fellow neighbors as our enemies. And I think we can do both of those things at once. How well we do it will determine...
Sky News Australia also has their opinion about J.D. Vance. Let's have a look.
That was none other than Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Let's have a look at the moment the news hit the floor and Trump walked in with his pick.
My honor to nominate Ohio Senator J.D. Vance for the office of Vice President of the United States of America.
Well, let me throw my cards on the table. I think this was a great choice. Look at the other options he had. Marco Rubio was a tryhard, nobody had heard of Doug Burgum, and Kristi Noem had shot a dog. So, they're all out. But even beyond this little process of elimination, J.D. Vance is a spectacular choice, and let me explain why. You see, right now, the normal so-called expert political advice for Trump would be telling him that he should have gone for somebody who was a so-called moderate. Somebody who could broaden the base. Somebody who could go out there and reassure nervous suburban voters that Trump isn't nuts, that the VP will be there to moderate him and the administration. You know, basically the idea would be that the VP pick would be someone to keep the White House plugged into the blob or the swamp or the deep state or whatever you want to call that vast freedom-killing bureaucracy that Trump has vowed to tear down. But, as is his wont, Trump went the other way from the experts. And J.D. Vance is a serious conservative. He's spoken at national conservatism conferences. That's, by the way, a movement you are going to hear a lot more about in the coming weeks, trust me. And J.D. Vance has an incredible resume that has taken him from a childhood in a small, absolutely dirt-poor town in southern Ohio, to the Marines, to Iraq, to Yale Law School, to venture capital, and then to the Senate. This is the American dream. He wrote a book about it. They made a movie of it too called Hillbilly Elegy. Now, politically, again, Vance is a conservative populist, and a skeptic on the sort of free trade that gutted the local economy where he grew up. And he equally detests the sort of neoconservative foreign policy that he saw when he was in Iraq. He signed up, by the way, for that after 9/11, for what was the original so-called Forever War. Now, for Trump, strategically picking this guy enables a few things to happen. Number one, it means that Vance can be the attack dog, and Trump can run a much more positive campaign. Think John Howard and Peter Costello, by the way, in Parliament, if you want an Australian analogy there. But number two, it also means that, assuming the Trump-Vance ticket gets into office, well, it means that Democrats in Congress or prosecutors with a grudge or whomever else will be less likely to try and impeach Trump and get him out of office. You see, Vance, in the number 2 seat, acts as an insurance policy. If you take down Trump, you'll get the same, but worse, and in the body of someone who is right now only 39 years old. That age, by the way, is fascinating too. I mean, the torch is really passing here, and it shows the huge generational difference here. Remember, Vance served in the Iraq War. Biden voted for it. Now, thirdly, this pick gives the Republicans a real narrative of economic opportunity. Again, Vance made it out of a dirt poor former factory town to the heights of American success.
David Weigel also has studied J.D. Vance for years and has something to say about him.
Yeah, well, Vance literally wrote himself into history. He was a working class kid from Ohio. Nobody disputes that. Had a rough upbringing. He went to military, then to Ohio State, graduated in 2 years, went to Yale Law School, and while there was mentored into writing Hillbilly Elegy, which is sold, I think at this point, selling more now, 2 million copies. So a lot of Americans got to know him in 2016 as a Rust Belt working class conservative who thought Donald Trump had the wrong prescriptions to save people like the ones he grew up with, that they were being misled by Donald Trump. And he did evolve. And during the Trump presidency, the way he tells it is that the scales fell from his eyes. He started to see that what he was told about Trump were lies. At various points, he's talked about breaks he had with the liberal consensus. So the Kavanaugh nomination, he thought he was being railroaded. He thought attacks on Trump were unfair. He ran for Senate in 2022 as an America First candidate, completely in line with Trump policies, successfully getting his endorsement, and telling that conversion story, telling Republican voters who saw lots of ads of him bashing Trump on TV from 2016 that they could be like him. He was wrong, and we on the road to Damascus saw the light and supported Trump.
So based on your reporting, is that conversion sincere? Because his critics point out that to go from comparing Donald Trump to Hitler to serving as his running mate, that evolution is really craven and calculated.
Well, lucky for him, it's a very common story, and it's one of the themes of the RNC this week. He will be one of several speakers who say they were told lies about Donald Trump, then they saw him act in office, then they were converted to him. And even if outside this convention, a refrain you hear from a lot of people, and you've heard it from Vance, is that the media focuses on his tweets, focuses on the way he speaks, doesn't focus on the results. So within the Republican Party, that's a very safe place to be. Talking to Democrats about how they want to run against Vance, a lot of them think that's a dead end. Saying that he is it helpful? Is it going to be helpful in a debate maybe, that he can be made to defend that and flip-flops? Potentially. They're more focused on the conservative record he had once he started running for office, including some disagreements with Donald Trump, some static with other members of the party who didn't want him as the nominee.
His opposition to Ukraine aid has been a real feature of his time in the Senate. How rooted is his non-interventionist view? How rooted is that in his military experience?
It's very rooted in his own military experience. He enlists before he goes to college, serves in Iraq, and he comes away with a critique that Donald Trump adopts eventually too, which is that there are forever wars around the world. There are nation-building exercises that George W. Bush and a lot of Democrats engaged in, and they made America weaker. They took resources away from the heartland. You saw when he came to the floor yesterday when he was joining the rest of the evening's program. He comes on stage to Merle Haggard's America First, which is an anti-Iraq war song. It's about spending resources here and not over there. And he has been consistent on that in a very short political career. He is anti-interventionist. He has a different stance on Iran, like a lot of Republicans, but that is the biggest point of disagreement between him and a lot of Republicans. And it was litigated in the primary in 2022 when the Ukraine war had just begun. Russia had just invaded. His position was he didn't care. He didn't care about Ukraine's interest. It wasn't worth spending American money there. And that is a disagreement between him and a lot of Republicans who worry that if Trump gets back in office, and I talked to a few yesterday, with this ticket, people around the world, Vladimir Putin will say, we know what to expect from these guys. America's going to pull out of its responsibilities around the world.
Is the expectation that he would have more policy influence in the West Wing if they win, because Donald Trump is not as invested in policy as past presidents have been?
Well, a lot of people want to be writing policy for the Trump administration. That's been one of the biggest arguments inside the party and from Democrats pushing outside. So Vance, for example, wrote the foreword to the president of the Heritage Foundation's upcoming book. The Heritage Foundation developed Project 2025. Vance is much more aligned with national conservatives, again, kind of anti-interventionist, in favor of family formation, in favor of limiting abortion, basically getting back to sort of 1950s American norms and immigration norms even. those policies are pretty strict. Now, he's only been in politics for a little while, but those policies have a real pedigree. And he came up reading conservative writers who've already thought this stuff out, who do want a policy role in the administration. So the sort of people who were hoping that they could push a Trump administration to the right compared to where it was in 2016 when he didn't have, apart from his close circle, he was relying on the Paul Ryan Republican Party. They do view this as a victory. The Paul Ryan Republican Party, the George Bush Republican Party, they're not going to be in the room. They're not going to be at the table. Who is going to be at the table? It is the anti-war national conservatives who have a completely different view of how you should spend money and where you should send troops.
Those views extend to abortion. Vance opposes abortion rights even in the case of rape or incest, a position that differs from Donald Trump's public stance. He says abortion rights should be left to the states after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe.
On policy, they've had a disagreement from how Vance ran for Senate. He said he was 100% pro-life. He has ameliorated that position a little bit in interviews since then and talked about what's realistic. He's supported Lindsey Graham's 15-week national ban, but that's probably not going to happen. What's important, I think, is his intellectual framework for this. He has called himself a natalist. He has 3 kids, who he talks about a lot. He's criticized the left for what he calls the childless nature of the left. He has argued in speeches and writing that one problem with the left in America, and that's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris running the country right now, is that they're prioritizing family planning, they're prioritizing alternative lifestyles that are not traditional marriage with children, and that has been bad for America. Same reason that you should limit abortion. We should be encouraging, in his view, stricter policies that make it tougher to get divorced, to get an abortion, because look at his life. He did not have a lot of advantages growing up, and look where he is now. He tells that story and sort of universalizes it to the rest of the country. And that is something Democrats think they can argue against, because in Ohio, where Vance won, there was a ballot initiative that enshrined abortion rights that Vance was against, and it won by, I think, 18 points. Most people do not agree with that framework of how you need to bring the country back to kind of 1950s mores.
This week, the country will be introduced to Vance's family. His wife, Usha, is an accomplished litigator. She clerked for U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh when he was a federal judge. The daughter of Indian immigrants, she grew up in a suburb of San Diego.
Vance met his wife, Usha, at Yale Law School. They have 3 kids, and that's been part of his story. In his Senate campaign, if you look at even his advertising, it started out by talking about immigration, much more hard-edge, MAGA, America First stuff. It ended by emphasizing his family life. It ended by emphasizing, look what he built in Ohio, look what he was able to build himself. It even comes up in Hillbilly Elegy, before he would run for office. It was very central to him. His success meant that he was able to have a stable family, dogs running around the house, kids running around the house. And that is important to his story. That is also, keeping in mind, if he's contrasted with Kamala Harris, it's a story that they don't mind telling, because Kamala Harris got married late in life. She's the stepmother to Doug Emhoff's kids from a previous marriage. Not so subtly, this is some of the argument about the choice facing America, that this is somebody who formed a traditional family, somebody with a different religion, different background. They came together, and they have had the American dream unfold for them. That's part of the Vance story, and this is a family that they're watching Fox News, they're watching some of the family interviews he did or those TV ads. They know a little bit about them, but they will be the people most introduced to the country tonight.